Okay, we'll call the facilities meeting to order and ask for a motion to accept last meeting's minutes. On the floor, Claudia, seconded by Evelyn. Any changes, deletions, discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. I think we'll start with buildings and grounds, and Frank, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item is, we have money in the budget to refurbish the back parking lot out here, but we're not gonna get to it this fall, so we'd like to establish a capital project so that work can be accomplished in the spring. There'll be a mill and pave the back parking lot and the entrance road out to the gas pumps.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor by Ron, second by Evelyn. Discussion? Questions? Ron?
This is within the project, or this is you're already budgeted for this?
It's outside of the project.
It's outside of the project,
Yeah.
And the funding would be coming from?
From our current budget.
From your current budget, so you'd be so funding that otherwise would have fallen to the fund balance will be appropriated this year to complete the project next year. Is that?
Yep.
That's it. Okay.
Is that accurate? Craig?
Oh, just for clarification, so we approved money for this out of this year's budget, correct? And so this is more work to be done for, or this is just establishing?
This is just because we can't get it completed before the blacktop plant's
Oh,
closed.
so to roll it over for next year?
Do it in the spring.
Yep, gotcha. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
The only other thing I have is an update on the court project. There's a lot of things going on at once. We have disconnected most of the streetlights on this end of the building, so it could be a little dark out on this northeast side. We've ordered lights to put on the building for the parking area, so that shouldn't be an issue after this week. The garbage area, you'll notice over opposite of our shop, there's an excavated area there. That's where the roll-off containers are gonna go. That has started. They've got to do drainage and fill in that area. The Supreme Court entrance out front, the temporary entrance, they're working on. They're taking the steps off the top of the old steps, stack them next to it so that we can reuse them later on. They're putting a temporary deck over the top of what's left there, and then there'll be an entrance there, a heated entrance, and that'll become the main entrance for all courts once we get under construction. The asbestos abatement is ongoing. They've cut a hole through the foundation, and they are working on that. I would say probably another week or two, and they should be done with that. The loop road has been pushed out, and they'll be working on that. The loop road, the intent right now is to keep it open, at least one lane of traffic, probably both lanes throughout the day while they're working on it. So there shouldn't be any issues with the sheriff access or any of that. In the courtyard by the courts, they've dug the footings and poured the footings for the steel supports that will go to the new addition once, they wanted to get those footings in so that if they get to steel this winter, they can go ahead and do that. I think that's about it.
Okay, any questions for Frank? Ron?
Yeah, that granite slab, we've had some issues over time with that shifting and moving and whatever. We're gonna come back with the same technique, basically. We're gonna set it in place, caulk it, that kind of thing.
Right
is that a
now,
wise, I guess what I'm wondering, is that a wise decision given our experience with that?
I think if it's properly caulked and set in place, it can be used. I mean, that's a decision we can make down the road if we decide we wanna just pour steps or.
Okay. There might be an opportunity for some value engineering there and end up with a better result at less cost. That's my only comment.
Our issues with the granite were mostly water issues because over the years the caulk is worn out and it's heaved.
Well, but that's tough to keep that properly caulked anyway. easy thing.
Jeff, you had something to add?
I just wanted to add the new park and ride lot is roughed in, we've covered that with millings, there's some more grading to be done. The intent will be to open that park and ride lot, get some signage up, and actually use it with the millings this winter, and then pave it in the spring when the planks open again. And then there's another area we've identified to expand some parking, directly out the back here, where there's a line of vehicles in front of Frank's building. We wanna expand that a little bit in order to provide another, line of cars, parking counter to that line. So it'll consume a little bit of this, grass area in the back that's really not used for anything now. That area between that existing row of cars and the hydrant, will provide us a little bit more relief, so, unless anyone objects, we're gonna go ahead and proceed with roughing that out and getting that, graded and then ready for paving again in the spring.
Craig?
And is that a permanent lot then? Permanent expansion?
I think it would be a permanent expansion, and we'll pave it in conjunction with the employee lot paving that we just established a project for in the spring.
Any other questions? Okay, not on the agenda, and I think we better address it. In legislative and rules, there was discussion on the smoking policy. It was voted on to, extend and permit smoking for, a year, one more year, so that people could adjust to it. The issue then became, to send it back to facilities to do locations of where they could be smoking, and I think it actually expanded. It originally was just for this campus here, not inclusive of the jail or the other off-campus facilities, and I think it's expanded now to all facilities. So I guess the discussion here is, legislative voted on, extending permitting smoking for one more year. And we're supposed to discuss, where they would smoke and how we would go about facilitating that. I talked to Jeff briefly, he talked about gazebos, et cetera, but with the expanded nature of the other facilities that we own off campus, DPW garages, et cetera, could run into a costly measure. I'll just throw it out there, my idea would be to permit smoking in their cars, for the winter. I think that's, they're attempting to smoke and stay warm, and it's, anyways, that's my suggestion. And then when the weather gets better, if we had a designated area so we could do cleanups of butts, et cetera. Anyways, that's where we're at. Would someone else help me out here? Evelyn?
I think most of our, not all of them, but most of our areas already have designated smoking because we've been doing it right along. So I don't necessarily think that that would be too big of a problematic, unless some off-site department has a particular issue that maybe we need to address sooner, which I'm sure we'll hear about if they do. But I don't think that sounds fine. And then in the spring, if we're running into it, we can always, get some butt cans and designate an area if we need to do that. But I think a lot of our spots already have, like the gazebo out back, certain spots that are already designated, so I think we can continue to use those.
Did you?
There is a gazebo out back here, but I don't think there's been a formal designation of that for smoking, because it's used for people that are smoking and people that go out there and sit and eat for lunch, so.
I knew they had been smoking in the gazebo previously, so.
Conflict between smokers and non.
I've actually had complaints of smoking in the gazebos while people are trying to eat their lunch out there.
That gazebo existed even before the 50-foot ban that went into place. So that gazebo's been there for a long time. It wasn't designated either, or it was more of a break area for employees. Then the county instituted the 50-foot within, 50-foot perimeter smoking ban around the buildings. And we put out a lot of, the butt cans and stuff like that. But there hasn't been any formal designation for any areas. There's been maybe informal use.
Okay. I know that we've got certain areas that are used and fairly
I think
frequently.
Westmount might have had a designated area over there, but as far as the county center goes, I'm not aware of any formal designation.
Ron?
What's the big concern? I mean, if we're just gonna extend it for a year, it's been happening for the last 5 or 10 years, let's just leave it alone.
Is that, that's acceptable to me. Frank and Jeff, I think, have to contend with it. Is that something you can work with, or there sounds like there's other issues as far as designated areas?
Well, I think if we're gonna allow smoking on the campus, we need to put the butt cans back out and go back to the 50 feet from the building, because right now, butts are just going wherever they feel like going.
Okay. And that's a doable,
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
complicated issue. Okay, Claudia?
John is chair of legislative, and maybe he can speak to it. My recollection was we were only withdrawing the ban to the extent that people could have a spot to smoke. Not that we're withdrawing the ban, but they're not to be smoking all over campus. So we needed a spot, and we asked facilities to come up with the spot idea. I don't like the idea of allowing people to have, the gazebo or, anywhere to smoke as their spot. We need to come up with a specific area. And the if people are sitting in the gazebo having their lunch and they don't wanna be smelling other people's smoke, that's exactly why we put the ban in place. And they shouldn't be using the gazebo for a smoking spot. The smoking spot, in my mind, is to keep our employees safe from standing on the edge of the road during the winter when the plows come by.
Yes.
This is a pretty big.
I don't understand what's happening right now, but that's, maybe in their cars is fine, or a spot where there's smoke buckets.
Okay, I think you lended some clarity to it, because I would agree with that. I thought after legislative that it was gonna go to the full board and be acted on, but I guess it was set.
It was kicked back to.
It was kicked back to facilities to identify the spots similar to what you're pointing out. And we didn't do that in our last meeting. And I did receive an email from, I would assume it was a union representative, and I was trying to track down exactly where we were with it, because it's getting confusing. But I guess that's where we're at. John, can you help out?
Yeah, well, there's two issues. One is, the one issue of fairness is that the ban only applied to this building. It didn't apply to the other facilities. And some thought that that wasn't fair. Why just this building? Why not, the prison? Why not DPW? Why not elsewhere? Why just this building? Okay, fair enough. So the thought would be that if smoking's bad, and I think we all agree smoking's bad, we want everyone to quit. If we all agree we want everyone to quit. But we're trying to be fair. There was a petition that came to us, and they said, listen, give the smokers some consideration, because, for example, they're standing out there on the corner of, on Glen Lake Road, smoking. That's not good for the neighbors who live there. They don't like it, and that's the public safety issue, and okay. Well, what if we said, okay, we'll designate certain areas around for you smokers where you can go and smoke, but that'll be 1 year. And you know it's gonna be 1 year, okay? And then that gives you 1 year to start thinking about weaning off of this very, very bad habit. All right, so we thought that would be a compromise. It sent the message. Okay, so now we're down to designated areas where smokers can go for a 1 year time period, with the understanding that we're all gonna be non-smoking campus, and there won't be designated areas for smokers within a year, so now work on it. Okay, that was my take. Right?
Supervisor McDevitt.
We voted on the resolution, non-smoking, I didn't read it close enough. I made the assumption that the resolution included basically this entire campus, all county buildings within this campus. To exclusively make it applicable to this building, I just don't think is common sense, or it goes to the intent of what the legislation is all about. We're attempting to get people to be healthier. We're attempting to maybe create, situations where, you know, families are, and their loved ones are just better off. So, we have to revisit this resolution in terms of other buildings within the confines of this situation. For someone basically to say, gee, I'd prefer not to have, this particular building covered by the non-smoking situation is, it's just poor public policy. So, we have to revisit the issue, and I think we have to redo this resolution in terms of what facilities we are indeed talking about. And if we're gonna have a policy, we have to include all of the buildings within the campus. So, I would pose that for, you know, going forward.
Yeah, and did we address that in legislative and rules, pretty much what Mr. McDevitt said, that where it's gonna be every building, or?
Well, what we said was, we think that the smoking ban, or the way that we handle smoking should be uniform for all county facilities. And that included the prison, DPW building, and so forth. So if you're gonna designate a smoking area, let's say one at the south end and one at the north end here, maybe one for the prison, and maybe one for DPW, that would be in excess of 50 feet from the building, and a designated area that is a safe area for smokers for 1 year. All right, that's where we landed. Now, if you agree with the philosophy that the smoking ban should apply to all county facilities, and if you agree with the philosophy that we should designate smoking areas for smokers on a 1 year basis with the message that that is going to be for only 1 year, and then all the campus will be in non-smoking, then all we need to do is designate the areas that will be smoking areas.
Okay, and that's the question before facilities. The debate has happened at legislative to extend it for a year. Facilities, it was sent here to pick a spot because of what Claudia has recognized. So are we capable as a facilities committee of identifying and getting those permissible spots in the uniform nature that John just addressed with all buildings? Ron?
Yeah, I would ask that our staff prepare a plan within that philosophy, which they could present to us, which would identify these areas. I would assume if you identified an area like that, would you move a picnic table to it or something? I don't know, something to accommodate, and then we can look at it as opposed to our trying to walk around the whole campus saying, well, how about here? Well, how about here? Well, how about here? I mean, I think that they're more than capable of sitting down and striking these areas, and then we can look at, we have something to react to. And if we're either opposed to the idea generally, or if we're somewhat supportive of the idea, we'll have a plan in front of us that we can then act upon, as opposed to trying to design something sitting here today. I think we could kill a lot of time today trying to do that.
That's my point. I want to kind of pinpoint, it's a 1 year extension, trying to be practical about it. Craig, you had your hand up first.
That's a good idea about staff developing a plan. Along with that plan, let's have a very clear statement of what the problem is that we're trying to solve here. The whole campus-wide ban was for some reason, but I was never really clear on, but besides making it smoke-free or for health reasons, of what the problem is about people smoking around here, because that will then guide the plan, the solution on there. And also to iterate the fairness issue, that we are affecting employees' lives here for the county, and to have it just to affect a group of people that are here is one thing, should also be everywhere else. the fact that no one else has proposed, we need to eliminate smoking from these areas, whether it's our, Countryside Nursing Home or DPW garage. Makes me wonder, what the big issue is right here, and therefore it should be clearly stated.
Ron?
I just, a good idea to have our staff do it, and specifically, it should be the minimum of picnic table and a trash bucket, a butt bucket. I mean, we're not talking anything, we're not talking building anything.
Okay. And go ahead, Rachel.
I just also think at this time it might be a good idea to have Jackie or someone reach out to our employees too in a general notice. Let them know that, say, December 1st of next year will be a smoke-free campus, and here are the different options in terms of getting help and in terms of quitting, and give that, it sounds like the board has decided upon giving a year's notice to employees to let them know. So maybe now's the time to do it so that we stick to that year date, even if it takes us a month or two to figure out, this solution.
Do I have any
I'm
sorry.
Can I chime in here? We've already, Dan Durkee in Public Health already put out the information to employees once before when we did the smoking ban. The problem is, the real issue arose when they all went out to the corner of Glen Lake Road, and neighbors were complaining about the smoke wharfing across the road and the butts being left all over out there. So that kind of raised the issue. I've had a couple emails from employees in the DSS building, so I think Frank can come find a smoking area fairly quickly, and we can send out a notice to the employees that will go for a year. Right now, they know it's still, we haven't changed any policies, and I've told the unions are good with it until we come up with the smoking areas, and then we can send out a memo saying it's going to be reworked for 1 year only. But let's wait till we get the smoking areas set up.
And just to clarify, in your suggestion, Dan, I mean, is there, maybe I'm naive about this, but we do have horribly cold winters. I don't know where those smoking areas are going to be. Is there harm to just letting people smoke in the car?
That's what I just thought with the weather coming and the snow, and I'm seeing where they go now. Is that a permissible thing, or is that not a good idea? To give them some relief and start the clock as it will, because the longer we take, if we're giving them a year, I'm assuming this clock is going to start after the fact. But that would at least give it this safety issue addressed from being near the road and walking all the way out, and the slippery, the ice, etc. Go ahead, Evelyn.
I'm just gonna say, I told you someone that when this first came up, the people standing out on the side of the road going across, we created that problem. We didn't have that problem prior to trying to institute this policy. This whole thing kicked off because we had an issue, like Jeff mentioned, with people wanting to eat their lunch in a gazebo and other people smoking out of there. And back then, I told the board, and I stand by it today, you will not stop people from smoking here, even if you declare it. There's no way you can enforce it. And they'll be smoking in your cars, and you'll have butts everywhere. And what do we hear today? We have butts all over the place because we've made it, there's nowhere to dispose of them. I think you can give them a year, and it's fine if the board wants to go on, and I think in the end of a year, we'll be back here doing the same darn thing again. I think we're creating more problems for ourselves than we're actually fixing. And I really have a level of discomfort with playing kind of God here a little bit and telling people that you aren't going to smoke or you will smoke. We can certainly want people to be healthy, but we cannot actually force them to be healthy. That's their free choice and their right. I know a lot of people have gone to smoke-free campuses, but I'm going to stand by the fact that they're never really truly smoke-free because somebody's smoking in their car. You can't make the employees stop. And there are some of them who have smoked for so long, it's incredibly difficult to stop. I'd love to see them all healthy, I'd love to see them all stop, but I think in a year you're going to find out that giving them a year didn't make them stop smoking. They just put it off for a year, and we're right back here again.
Okay. Does the committee wish to sanction that it's okay to smoke in a car? Is anyone against that? For safety reasons, and at least we're addressing.
The car is so many feet from the building.
Okay.
The last question that I have is, if you violate this rule, this law, what happens?
That's way over my head.
Well, we're debating something and making it sound like it's a law and you're gonna go to jail if you get caught smoking. What's the downside?
Our county attorney.
Mr. Chairman, the current policy provides that it is a basis for disciplinary proceedings if a person's smoking on the.
Give them a verbal warning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I entertain a motion that would allow, smoking in their car, 50 feet away from the building? Gotta get a motion to put it on the floor. Ron, second. Matt, any discussion?
Is this for
Craig?
what time period?
I'm sorry?
Is this forever?
No, just for the year,
Okay.
just for the year.
Should we stipulate that in the resolution?
And this applies to all
Well-
county facilities? All county facilities?
Because I think there's two things going on here. At least we clarified that, and secondarily, the recommendation to have Frank identify and bring the plan back here to okay it. My thought is what's gonna happen is, it will not be getting to the December, meeting. Because, you know, our next meeting's gonna be after our December meeting. And then it's gonna go to January's meeting, and meanwhile, we have safety issues. So, if we could get the car part taken care of, maybe that would be better to forward to the December meeting with Frank working on a plan for designation.
But I don't know why we can't really complete this and then just come before the next board meeting with its locations and just take care of it in December, get it done. Simple thing, you're gonna give them a year, you set up an area with a butt can, maybe a picnic table or something, and get them off the corners, and it takes care of. I did work with the DSS, they have buried their breaks, so they don't have 15 people going out. So they're working with us, but this will appease the smokers for a year, if that's what you wanna do. And Frank, I'm sure we can find smoking areas fairly quickly, and as far as their cars, I don't know how we can prevent them from smoking in their cars anyways, that's their car. So just, you know, if that's what they wanna do, let them do it, as long as they don't kick the butts on the ground, and then we'll get the smoking police after them if they do.
Okay, and we have a motion and a second on the floor, on the smoking in the car. Can we call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay,
We'll get the information before the next board meeting on the
Alright.
smoking area, Dan.
all right, and you'll work on your plan, and, sounds good to me.
Right around.
Okay, we'll start with the airport now, Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a resolution request to increase the contract to do the sub-consultant work for the glide slope antenna modeling. This is with CNS Engineers. The dollar amount is $12,000.
Well, stand by.
Oh.
Can I just have him get this on the floor? And
Yes.
I apologize for,
Certainly, but this is for $12,500 for the environmental assessment preliminary engineering. Mistakenly, the auditor picked up on this error back in December when we approved the contract to CNS. I did not include the glide slope antenna modeling in with CNS's contract. At the time, I thought that was going to be a separate contract. CNS hired Thales to do the glide slope antenna modeling, and that cost us $12,500. We'll increase CNS's agreement to cover those costs for the sub-consultant work. The money is in the grant, the local share has already been allocated, there is no funding increase necessary, we just need to amend the contract with CNS for the auditor.
okay, motion get on the floor by Matt, second by Evelyn. Discussion, questions? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And I'm sorry I didn't open it up to the public, and Travis, wanna-
Travis Whitehead, Queensberry. I just had the question back on Public Works. What documents have been delivered under the contract to Bergman at this point, as far as reports, the engineers on the municipal center?
do you have, is that, Brian, do you have?
I don't know, whatever they asked for, I presume that, Frank's shop provided to them. Whatever the backup documentations were, the plans for the project, the billing, evidence from the utility bills.
Is that the question, Travis? Is
From
it
Bergman,
what we provided
reports,
to them?
no, reports from Bergman
What they've given us?
in satisfaction of the contract.
They have provided some draft information to us.
Right, well, you know that Mr. Freeman says whether you mark it draft or not draft doesn't make any difference, but it should be available to, are those documents available to the public or to the supervisors or one or the other?
Any supervisor come to my office and see anything that's in there anytime.
How about any member of the public?
If it's releasable under FOIL, it's releasable.
Okay, and is there any problem with any of those supervisors providing the information to whoever they choose?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Yes.
For what reason?
Because we may be involved in litigation.
Well, that's a
I
nice
don't
one
want
to
to, I
drag
don't want to turn over what may be our weapons in litigation to the public. I'll ask the supervisors that, and the supervisor will make the decision whether they want to do that or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about Mr. Travis. Go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, Dan, I had a few questions, I didn't know when I should come up. Mark
Mark.
Westcott, Queensbury.
Mark, just a second. Claudia, do you have something pertinent with what Travis' question
I'm sorry,
was?
Claudia.
That's okay, I
Go
was
ahead.
gonna make a comment, just, but Greg can back cover that.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. I just had a question about the courthouse update, the updated costs. I read the treasurer's budget report asking for that from a bonding standpoint. I'd like to know it from a taxpayer standpoint, what the updated cost estimate is for the courthouse expansion. Is there going to be an update on that at some point?
As far as you want to bring them up to date with what we received with the bids and we're...
Yeah, I don't have that file with me. I'd be happy to come back to the committee. There's no, we did review that in detail back when we awarded the contracts. And then we also had subsequent meetings of the core team that were public meetings. I don't have that with me, but the project is on budget. Work is underway, and we haven't gone back to the treasurer and told them that they're gonna need to bond anything additional from what the original estimates were.
All right, thank you. Quick comment on the smoking ban. I looked up SUNY Adirondack's policy while you were talking, and they have a complete campus-wide ban. The whole SUNY system does. There's no designated areas. It's just a total smoking ban. I'm over there a lot. I don't see butts on the campus. I don't see people smoking on the perimeters. Just FYI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that wanted to speak? Okay, Ross, back to you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a miscellaneous resolution request form. This is to authorize the chairman to sign the seeker parts 2 and 3 for the runway 1 extension project. In a nutshell, the seeker parts 2 and 3 documents are for the full environmental assessment form. They've been drafted and completed by our consultants, CNS Engineers, on our behalf. It does have a positive declaration for the determination of significance, and that an environmental impact statement will be prepared to further assess the impacts and possible mitigation and alternatives.
Okay, motion to get it on the floor. Evelyn, seconded by Ron. Discussion.
No, look at me, Matt, okay.
I read my emails this weekend.
Good job. Well, I didn't send it until late last night, and I know that Ross and Jeff have not had a chance to look at it, but I did have some questions, some revisions that I would like to see the committee make. And if you'll just entertain me to go through it, I'll do it as quickly as I can. And page 1, section 1, letter E, I was wondering, I mean, we're checking no to small impact on construction continuing for more than 1 year or in multiple phases. Are we saying that the entire extension project is going to be completed in less than a year? And are there any other phases that we are not considering as part of this, like additional obstruction removal that's gonna have to take place once we do this? Or is that all wrapped into this, definition of our action?
The obstruction removal that would be needed for the runway extension is part of this environmental assessment, this action. So that is in there. As far as construction, the duration for the length of construction, we won't have that proposed schedule until we get into the engineering and actual design phase of the project, but the impact, because of typical construction length is a small impact, or maybe a small impact may occur. That was the analysis that CNS had provided based on their experience.
Jeff?
Yeah, and in their analysis, they recognize that the construction would be split over 2 fiscal years, and that's basically a mechanism of the funding program from FAA. They asked us to split over 2 fiscal years. And projects like that and the guidance from DEC, there's some guidance in the environmental assessment form workbook, that we use as a guideline that talks about projects that are prolonged, with less activity over a longer period of time can still be considered a small impact versus, more robust project all in 1 year. So we can take a look at that, but I think CNS addressed that one already in their analysis.
Sounds reasonable. Okay, page 3, on impact to groundwater, we checked yes. However, everything is checked no or small impact may occur. I think we should add to section H, other impacts would include, impact to the groundwater that is potentially hydrogeologically connected to the marl fens and the wetlands that are there. And also, under that one, I think we should be adding mineral impacts. The whole reason there's marl fen there has to do with the mineral levels. And I thought about putting that under geological features, but it's not really a geological feature. It has to do with the groundwater, I think. So I would like to see us add something to section H about groundwater being connected to the wetlands on the surface, and then mineral impacts to the groundwater. And that would be checked either no or small, or moderate to large.
Then I'll follow up with our consultants
Okay.
and have them take a look at your suggestions.
Under section 5, I looked at the analysis that they did for this one, and it says that, in part 1 we didn't check anything, so that's why we checked no here, but it does seem to me that we would be modifying existing drainage patterns. So maybe that can be looked at too, under 5B. And then, page 4, we've gotten some public comments about air emissions from the aircraft using the extension. I think it's reasonable to check yes there. Even if we put no or small impact, I think this should be on our radar, unintended. That if we're having aircraft that are taking off with greater fuel, having more emissions coming out of them, that's something we should be examining because of the extension. And then, on that same page, section 7, it's my understanding that those wetlands are habitat for bog turtles, which are a threatened species under federal designation. And then, on the next page, page 5, section H, or letter H there, I think we need to move that over to moderate to large impact, because we are going to be clear cutting far more than 10 acres of forest. It's gonna be 23.
What was the last one, Claudia, what were you on?
Moving that checkbox on letter H from no to small to moderate to large. This section is already marked yes, so impacts on plants and animals are already a concern, but I think we need to identify that a little bit better. And, I wanted to ask about, on page 7, there's a note about 2 historic sites on the airport of county-owned property, MDF 1 and MDF 2, and structure G located outside project limits, which I don't know what any of that is, and we have no to small impacts. I just wanted to get some feedback from Russ on what those items are, and do we need to move that over to moderate to large impacts?
Hartigan Archaeological did survey work for those historical sites. That's been well documented in a couple of different instances. Those sites are located along Queensbury Avenue. There's some stone foundation there buried in the trees. There's really not much, and the runway extension work is far removed from those locations. It's on airport property, but not, it's outside the project limits.
Okay, so that's at least been identified, but sounds like small and no to small is fine. Okay. Then page 8, we checked yes for an impact on energy. I just wanted to get a better idea. I mean, I think that's good. So that's fine, move on from that one. And then page 9, which has to do with impact on noise, odor, and light. And this one, there is a note about lights. I think we also need to add a note there on section F about noise from the aircraft using the extension.
That has been analyzed, there has been a noise study completed, it's all in the NEPA document, the noise analysis has been completed.
Okay, so there's no reason not to wrap it into this though. If
Right,
we
the
put
impacts
some-
were found, there weren't found to be any noise impacts for that analysis. The noise impacts for the 65 decibel all remain on airport property.
I think what we'll have to do on each of these is go back to the DEC guidance documents. They define what they consider no or small impact versus what they consider moderate or large impact, so those would have some quantifiable things to look at regarding that.
Okay, and then the last thing, part 3, I think we do need to identify in the narrative there that scoping will be conducted. I feel strongly that public scoping is an important part of this process.
I'm sorry, where do you, what section?
In the narrative on part 3,
Pointed out.
where we're talking about all the reasons that we're giving this a positive declaration, I think it's standard that you call out now that we're doing the public scoping process. Because when you do the EMB notice, you're gonna want that to be identified.
That decision to do the public scoping, I think, is something that we need a board action on, and we need a funding source for it. So that, I think we're gonna have to discuss that one some more.
That's a separate issue from what we're doing here? Because you need funding?
If we wanna do public scoping for seeker, that is not grant eligible, it would require county funding to do. We talked on that a little bit last month about the scope of the work involved, the fact that the FAA doesn't require it, and you know, frankly, they're not going to fund it from a seeker standpoint, from a state seeker standpoint, they're not gonna fund it. So if the county wants to pursue that, there would be some expense incurred that would not be grant eligible.
What, do you have a cost associated with it?
I didn't print Ross's, Ross had provided something to the committee. Do you have a copy of that?
I don't have it on the thumb drive, but it was $30,000 worst case scenario is the cost if we're doing, scoping. That could be reduced a little bit based on Supervisor Bramer's suggestion about combining the public scoping with the NEPA hearing, perhaps some, but only because you might be incorporating one round of comments instead of 2. But there still would be the need for an additional meeting because the seeker public hearing and the NEPA public hearing, those paths would diverge and end up having to do an extra public hearing as well for that process.
Claudia, could you explain that? That was the first I heard about last week when Ross was telling us about we have a decision to make. Can you explain to me what the scoping does as far as how we move forward and what it doesn't do if we didn't do it?
Sure, scoping is the process by which we're gonna tell the public this is all the information that we're gonna put in our EIS, which a lot of it is already out there, so, I think 30,000 is really excessive, and maybe it's time to look at CNS. I mean, there are other local engineers who can do this kind of work, especially with all of the work that's already been done. But the scoping makes sure that the public and the supervisors know all of the information is gonna be packed into the EIS and how we're gonna get there. We're gonna do we've already done a noise study, so we put that in as an appendix. We've already done some wetlands work, so we already have a basis there, but we're gonna do a little bit more studying X, Y, Z. And we just outline it and list it there. It's probably very similar to what's already in the EIS, the environmental assessment that was submitted to the FAA.
Okay, Craig?
So, doing research on what scoping is here, pulled up the Department of Environmental Conservation's website here with the seeker and the handbook, table of contents, and first thing here, what is scoping? Scoping is a process that develops a written document, a scope, which outlines the topics and analysis of potential environmental impacts of an action that will be addressed in a draft environmental impact statement. And the process for scoping is set out in 6 NYCRR 617.8. So, seems to be a fairly simple thing. $30,000 for really just outlining what is it we are going to focus in on. And then on this whole page of describing what scoping is, it just seems that it does promote transparency in the whole situation. Public does have input on, well, what are you looking at? It brings up their concerns. It has also some good reasons for doing it as well, which are what we have witnessed throughout this whole project, is that it seems to be a good idea. And $30,000, holy smokes, I don't know what they're thinking for just coming up with the topics that are going to go into the EIS. The EIS is going to be the major work.
Rachel?
Perhaps I'm not as familiar with the protocol, but I'm wondering why do we have to go with CNS for this? I mean, isn't there an option to be able to go out and get some quotes from other companies on?
Absolutely, you don't need to, you can do it yourselves, you don't need to hire a consultant if you don't want to, you can do the scoping on your own, and follow the secret process, or you can get additional quotes from other consultant firms if you would like, absolutely.
I just think, given what both supervisors have said about that $30,000 price tag, I think if we shopped around, we might, definitely save a little bit of money there and then still accomplish the goal of the scoping.
And we have 2 other engineering firms that have been pre-qualified. I can check with Passero Associates and McFarland Johnson as well, and ask them to provide a cost estimate to do scoping for seeker.
But for right now, directionally, it would help if you knew the committee wanted to proceed with scoping, so that we can map out
Absolutely, I would certainly get
the plan moving forward.
started, and as well, now we still need to finalize parts 2 and 3 as well, but I can certainly get that process started for scoping if that's the direction that the committee wants to go in and the board wants to go in for the seeker document is scoping. I can absolutely get working on getting additional cost estimates and nailing down some of those costs more firm.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of the scoping is to ensure that we haven't missed anything. And, this has been a very public process over a lot of years. It would seem to me that we could, for example, produce this assessment such that it is on our internet site, and provide people an opportunity to comment on the scope, that choose to comment on the scope. We could even take out an ad pointing at it to people. Now, not everybody's computer literate, so I understand that's the weakness of that kind of approach, but then again, we could also say in the ad that anybody who wants to provide written comments could provide written comments, because the purpose behind it is to evaluate, for example, that perhaps there's a burial ground we're unaware of, that somebody that's a historian recognizes that is in the middle of this facility. That's the purpose behind it, is to ensure that what we're looking at is the full scope of the project. And so it would seem to me that we could develop that, and maybe as a matter of practice should do that anyway. It's just as a matter of practice. We provide this on our internet site in some fashion, and we let people know that it's there, and we invite people to comment on the scope of the work. People will comment that they're against it or for it or this or that or the other thing. That's not really what you're entertaining at this point in time. What you're really entertaining at this point in time is there something that we've missed? Are you aware of anything that we've missed? And so that would be a good thing to do, and I don't know why we couldn't do that with our own existing team. If that would be acceptable, because really what we're after, again, is to try to ensure that our scope is complete. If we have missed anything, we're going to evaluate it later, right? But we just want to make sure we haven't missed it at this stage. That would be my suggestion.
Evelyn?
I was just gonna say, I think we have a motion and a second on the floor, so before we put another motion and a second on the floor, we should vote on the first one first.
Yes, yes.
That's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Travis?
Thank you very much.
2 and 3.
I appreciate, being able to talk at this point in time. Thank you.
I would just add two things to what Claudia said, and it's not gonna take very long at all. On page 2 of 10, you know, she mentioned that the impact on geological features, whether or not that should be checked. I feel because the Marl Fen is a geological feature, it was created, you know, it's a geological feature. And that should be checked, yes. And on number 3, while it is checked yes, I believe, you know, that perhaps moderate to large impacts should be considered for F and G. I won't get into it anymore, but I would say F and G are more than just small. And all the way, just one more on page 8 of 10. Just a comment that, you know, everything that was said here is correct on the impact on noise. It is determined that, you know, there is no impact on noise. But it also was specified in that same environmental impact statement that that entire study was based on the fact that the airport was considered, and the traffic at the airport was considered to be short haul. And the entire need and purpose, the reason we're here today, is that the need is not for short haul. It explicitly says medium and long haul. So, you know, to me, you would need to reevaluate that section if you are specifying medium and long haul. So that's all I had to say on that. And I could quickly, if I could, agree with Mr. Conover and Ms. Sieber that scoping, and you know, with Ross, that the scoping need not be anything large. It also shouldn't be a time for people to get up and say, I'm for this or I'm against it. It is for, you know, you may have missed something. And I also don't know why it would not be appropriate for Ross to handle this by himself. I mean, I don't see why, you know, you couldn't put an ad out there and say, please direct your comments to Ross Dewberry, you know, in writing or whatever, and leave it at that, and say you did it. And, you know, this scoping is going to be needed for NEPA when you get there, and now you'll be one step ahead of that. So I don't see any reason for shortchanging it at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mark?
Just a quick one. As the well-known email blaster opponent of the airport runway expansion, I'd be happy to put that notice in my email blast in my list of 2000.
Okay. Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second on the floor. We have the changes or the recommendations that were made. Will that affect how we proceed with this motion and second? In other words, you have a document that we're acting on. We've had some recommendations. How you guys feel about what was stated? It all sounded like it was good information.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the last time we went through this on the Secret Part 1, we actually ended up having an additional meeting right before the board meeting. Remember, we went some back and forth because some of the recommendations that came out of committee weren't really technically correct. And after reviewing with our engineers and reviewing with the DEC guidance on it. So I think we need an opportunity to do that and address each of the comments that were made to see whether it's proper to change them or if there's a reason they need to stay the same. I suspect it's a blend of each. Some would be inconsequential to change, and others we might be in conflict with direct DEC guidance on what constitutes small or no impact versus what constitutes large or moderate to heavy impact. So I don't know that we can say yes, we'll adopt all the recommended changes without running into some conflict with DEC guidance.
Okay.
I guess it's up to the committee whether you want us to come back again with another draft.
This is my personal confusion. We have a document. We've had some changes suggested. You guys are going to review that with the powers to be. But what we're acting on is without Claudia's changes. or recommendations. And do we wanna do that? Is that proper, or can you comment on that, Claudia?
Thanks. I just think we should table it until the engineers have a chance to, maybe if they are technically incorrect, fine. But some of these, I think that, like, what Travis was talking about, the noise impacts, okay, maybe we have something that says noise impacts from the short haul airplanes are gonna be a big deal, but the whole point of this extension is to make it available for a longer haul, which means heavier airplanes and I don't know, louder exhaust. We've heard public comments about that. I don't wanna just ignore that. So I don't think we should adopt this exact document today.
Okay, Evelyn?
I don't think we're, actually adopting the document. As I read it, the purpose of request is to authorize the chairman of the board of supervisors to sign seeker parts 2 and 3 for the runway 1 extension. At least that's the purpose of the resolution request. I don't see why we couldn't send it forward and let Ross and Jeff look at the changes, if we need to make changes, or some of those suggestions need to be done. I don't see why they couldn't get back to us before the board meeting. We do have finance later this week. I mean, there'd be opportunity for it to come up again, but really, the resolution request, as I read it, is authorizing the chairman to sign the document. We're not actually adopting that particular document.
John?
I have no problem either way, but the extending the runway actually is a noise attenuator. It doesn't increase noise, it reduces noise. But whatever the board decides is fine with me. If you think that we need extra time for CNS to evaluate what Claudia's concerns and others have made, and then adjust this and then come back to us, I guess that's fine.
And I just asked the county attorney for his opinion.
I think either way is workable, Mr. Chairman. I think that, the opportunity to discuss, Supervisor Bramer's comments with the consulting firm last time we did that, and some of the changes that Supervisor had suggested she agreed with, other ones she had solid reasons why she didn't think they should be changed, and we had come up with a document that everyone agreed on, I think, at the board meeting. So I'd suggest an opportunity to do that, to discuss it with the consultant and come up with a revised draft and the reasons for either adopting the changes or for not adopting the changes.
Claudia, you wanna put a motion to table?
Yes.
You have a second? Matt? Okay, discussion? I don't think we discussed, right, on the...
There's no discussion
Okay.
for the motion at table.
To call the question, all in favor of tabling? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so moved. So we'll wait for those to get addressed and bring back next one. Ron?
Yeah, my only comment would be that, let's remember what this step is, that, if it's the prudent thing, if it's whether something is small or medium, it helps establish the scope of what the environmental impact statement is going to do. So, where we should be focused is that if there are those items that are checked, no, that we feel should be yes, that's where we really need to be focused. The impact statement can evaluate later an issue relative to, for example, like noise, for example. So if it's one box as opposed to another, I think that's where our attention should be in this, because what we're saying here is that right now is that we're going to prepare a full environmental impact statement, right? And then there'll be a draft, and that'll get a chance to get reacted to. So I appreciate Claudia's efforts in reviewing this, because I think it helps identify those things that we need to be focused on relative to the impact statement.
Okay. All right, Ross, moving on.
That's all I have for today.
Okay, anyone else have anything to come before airport committee? Any discussion? Craig?
Oh, just wondering, so where does scoping come in now?
I think
Are
maybe
you
you're
going
right.
to-
We did discuss that, and maybe we need a second motion that we wanna do the scoping. And I just want some clarity in the motion, so it's directional as far as because I think the caveat was the costing, how we avoid, Claudia, you had something?
I will gladly
Well,
defer.
I would make the motion that, I think it's just good practice anyway, to produce this document on an internet site such that it is, with whatever other additional background material we have, and to extend a general invitation to comment on the scope, be very specific. Mr. Westcott's prepared to also incorporate that in his extensive mailer. That, I think, I would thank him for that, and why not? And but the only thing I would ask is that all of the items that are received, we could do that at staff level, unless our staff has an objection. I don't think it'd be too time consuming, but I think there should be there should be an inventory and an accounting on it. In other words, all the comments that are received, we should have a chance to react to in some fashion. In other words, we shouldn't just discount something. So if we receive 5 comments, we should produce 5 comments for our review at the appropriate time.
And Jeff and Ross, you're of the understanding of how to proceed?
I think so, yeah. I will do my best to follow the guidance in the seeker handbook for public scoping and get that process and take advantage of our website as much as possible to get that out to the public.
Okay, Claudia, acceptable?
For this, yeah.
Okay.
So do you need a motion to proceed? with that?
Well, I think Ron just
I would make that
that was his
motion.
motion. Do you want to second that?
Sure.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Okay, anyone else have anything else come before? Rach?
I just want to highlight that we did have our first advisory board meeting. It went very well. I wanted to thank everyone who participated. We have some clear direction, and with the help, it was very helpful having our county attorney there in terms of setting some guidelines and a mission statement and how we want to proceed forward. But it was incredibly well received. Thanks to the Post-Star, we've had a lot of interest from members of the community and different pilots and people very interested in the group as well. So I think it was a positive step. A lot of ideas were exchanged. I know even Jeff walked away with some things to be able to follow up on that just from a dialogue. So it was very good, and hopefully, each month we'll be able, or every other month, have a brief report back to the committee.
All right. I do have one other thing, maybe Brian can help me out. We've been working with the Historical Society. The last meeting, we made sure that you were emailed the document that we have to act on for the agreement. We also sent that to the Historical Society so that they could meet and review and make sure it was up if they wanted any changes. And I did call Brian a few weeks ago. He hadn't heard anything from them. And have you heard anything? Is there any issues?
I have not heard of any hesitation or issues with the document. Mary may have, but I can certainly clarify that.
Okay. What I was hoping for is this meeting was that everyone would have clarity, would have read the document, and we could act on it to send it to the full board. And then, because they have some issues to take care of, and as we do, to get the building to the rentable condition that they're expected. Because I believe they have an August timetable to be out of where they are. So naturally, the sooner the better. And if anyone has a problem with the document, or would you please let me know now? Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to proceed with that agreement that we have for the Historical Society. And I would notify them that we pass it at committee level and we're moving it to the full board to act on. Ron, you want to make that motion? And second by Ron Conover. Any other discussion? Is that correct?
So, do we have this document? I'm sorry.
It was emailed to all the committee members after last committee meeting.
And nothing's changed as it's been...
We have not heard back from them to do any change. That was what we were anticipating, possibly be some changes, then we could talk about them. But the document that you have is what we're acting on now. Yeah. And if they do have changes, it'd have to go through Brian, and we'd have to address it before the full board meeting.
Yeah, it looked good.
Okay. Is that acceptable? Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Okay, if there's none other business, Craig?
What about the space for the EMS vehicles and equipment? How's that going? Where's that at?
We've had some site visits with Clark Patterson that are reviewing the structure to make sure that it meets the importance factor for emergency equipment.
Okay.
So that review is underway. We're trying to do that step by step to see if there's anything that is significant, versus that can't be overcome with modifications to the building or without extensive work to the building.
And would that be ready for next committee meeting? Because if he does wanna put his equipment inside, that would give him an opportunity if it meets the standards.
I have offered to, place the equipment behind, fence, cause I understand that was one of the major concerns was security, not necessarily weather. So I have offered, to put the equipment behind the fence either at the airport, which Brian would have access to, or at my, DPW shop in Warrensburg. We are limited on space, especially, that meets an importance factor to hold emergency equipment. I don't know, I did just meet with Clark Patterson on site, just last week, and reviewed some of the existing structure in the high bay section of the area, and what I asked Clark Patterson to do was first review that area, and then if that area is sufficient, then move on to the larger building, because they were kinda done in separate construction methods. But I don't know as far as a timeline of when or if we're gonna get to a point, here in the near term to be able to put that under cover. If we wanna put it under cover, I don't have a facility that meets an importance factor. I don't have a firehouse, other than the firehouse at the airport, which is full of fire equipment already. So I don't have another spot to put it until we confirm that it can meet the importance factor, of a emergency equipment shelter.
Matt?
Oh, sorry, as long as pretty satisfied.
No, go ahead.
I was, maybe I'm mistaken, but hasn't, this process been going on for a couple months now? Evaluating the structure to see if it's okay? I'm just curious why it takes so long to go through this.
We've been trying to do it as cheaply as possible and get as much information as we can on the existing structure, but the building was constructed 25 or 30 years ago. We don't have good records of it, and then a portion of the building was actually a prefab steel structure, which we've tried to contact the manufacturer of that steel kit and seek specific information. And they didn't have that. So some of it was the records search that we tried to do, because that really would have helped us and got us further along. Now we're into essentially looking at what limited drawings we have on the structure and taking field measurements and photographs for CNS to review.
Anyone else? Motion to adjourn? Motion by Evelyn, seconded by John. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.